Hi, my name's Brandon Sewell. I'm the owner of Seal Pro Painting and the host of the Off the Ladder podcast. And we exist to help home service business owners learn so that they can lead well and ultimately live life off of the ladder. Today, we've got a return guest, John Keefer with Keefer's Junk Removal. He's in my local market and he's a good friend of mine. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could, just for those who may not know who you are or might have not listened to the past episode, could you just really quick for the audience tell them a little bit more about you and what you do?
Yeah, man. So, as you said, I am the owner of Keefer's Junk Removal. We have been in business right over 3.5 years now. I want to say I was about a year and a half when I was on last time. And, business is awesome, man. You get to do a lot of different things for yourself. You get to make your own schedule, do your own thing, but it has its ups and downs as well. We'll do anything from a single item pickup to a full property clean out, shed demolitions, hot tub removals, boats, cars, RVs, you name it, we can probably do it. And if we can't, we have a network of people that we refer out as well.
Yeah. One of the things that we talked about in the last episode was just your approach to marketing. And, as somebody who is in the community that you work in and live in, I just want to tell you that I get inspired by your approach to business and just how involved you are in the community and how you give back and all of those things. And I think that's really powerful. And I know we touched on that in the last interview. What I want to do is, like you said, you've been in business. Well, then in that last interview, you were in business for a little over a year. Now you're a little over 3, you said. So I just want to, for the audience, share with them what are some of the benefits that you've seen from your community driven approach to marketing, that boots on the ground, involved, hands on, getting into the community. How has that benefited you, and how has it helped your business grow and scale and just exist in the community that we serve?
We get told a lot by a lot of other business owners that the only way to get in front of people is to pay for ads and spend a bunch of money on Google and Facebook and all these different things. But when we started our business, we wanted to take a different approach where if it's not for the people in our community that pay for our services, we wouldn't be in business, so in order to take care of those people, we do what we can to give back. So we have been a partner with a local nonprofit called the Waterway Warriors, where you've actually joined us on some of their cleanups, which we appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
And their big thing is really just trying to keep as much trash and eliminate any plastics, bottles, any kind of trash from entering our local river, which is the Indian River Lagoon. And since then, we have also accepted a seat on their board of directors to help make an even larger impact on what we can do to help our community. With that, we've also now become one of the ambassadors with our local Chamber of Commerce. So we are doing more with the Titusville Chamber. And we had kind of touched last time too, where we also do a Christmas event every year.
Right.
And being in junk removal, we're in the perfect position where we can keep as much out of the landfill as possible and find ways to get creative to give back.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, we do a Christmas event every year where donations that we collect through jobs, through people in the community, through drop-off locations, and we literally host an entire event with some of our favorite local vendors that all we ask of them is to offer a discount on their services, a raffle basket, something to give back for a free event. And people show up and we just give them decorations. We give them trees, because then it's not only keeping it out of the landfill, but then we're also able to. Holidays are tough. The economy is not great right now. Everybody's struggling. Holidays are usually the hardest time of year, and everybody dreads going to the holidays because half the time we can't afford it. So if we can do anything that we can to really give back, that is how you build your reputation in a community that anybody and their mother can do junk removal if you get a truck and trailer. So they think.
Yeah. What I love about that is, so many people talk about, making a difference or being a business that gives back. And what I love is that, like, for you, it's not like theory. It's not something that you just talk about for the hype. It's you're actually doing those things to give back, which I really appreciate. And like I said, it inspires me as a business owner. You talked about me getting involved in Waterway Warriors. I was like, here I am, I'm watching you and what you're doing. And, I was like, Man, that's what it means to say that like you care about your community, but then to put it into action, right?
Yeah.
It's easy for us to sit on the sidelines and, for the past, as long as I've lived on the Space Coast, the our waterways have been a huge topic of complaints of water quality, the river quality going down, algae blooms, fish kills, all kinds of stuff. And I think it's really easy to sit on the sidelines and just complain, but it's another to like actually get in, get your hands dirty and do something about it. And so I love that you're just a practitioner in that sense. Like the holiday thing, like we were a part of that with you a couple years ago, and to see that you're doing what you can with the resources that you have to make a difference. And I love that. So it's
Thank you.
inspiring. Just want to encourage you that it's seen, and I think that you're making a difference, and it's exciting to think like you're 3 years in. So man, what does the next 5, 10 years look like for you as a business owner and the impact that you'll be able to make? It's really exciting to think about and encouraging to see your journey. So I'm excited for you, and it's a joy to like be able to call you a friend and to see that difference that you're making, and you're inspiring other business owners, man. So that's really cool.
Thank you, man. Likewise.
Yeah, for sure. So let's kind of shift on to this too. Like with growing your business, one of the things that we had talked about in the past was reputation management and getting more reviews. I think that there is an approach on digital advertising, if you will, where like, so for example, on Google, I don't do paid ads or PPC for Google. But two things that I am a really big advocate for, and one more than other. The main thing is like your GMB, like keeping it updated, making sure you're constantly getting new reviews, making sure that you're showing up like in the top three for the map pack or local listings, and really just setting yourself as like the leader in that area for your industry. Now the other thing that I'm not as big of a fan, but I do is Google LSA. And the only reason I like that over PPC is just because it's like you set the budget and you get the leads that you pay for. And you
Yeah.
can get credits back for bad leads. So I do like that because I feel like there's a little bit more control. But the one that I think is a big focus for you is your GMB and getting those reviews. So I had told you about Nice Job, which is the reputation management software that we use, that automates the process for getting reviews. And as I have shared my own personal story, when I first started using it, I had been in business in this area in Titusville. We had moved our location from Orlando to Titusville, and we had been in Titusville for 3 years and had only gotten 10 reviews. And I was using another reputation management software at the time. I attended a conference, a virtual conference where Nice Job had like a breakout room. I met with them and they sold me on joining. I joined, and literally with like in a year, I think I went from 10 reviews to like over 60. And then the next year it just kept exploding to where now we're about to hit 200 reviews on our Google business profile. And so anyway, you started using it when? Like within the year?
Yeah, I think we're right around that year mark here soon.
Yeah. So if you could, just for the listeners, maybe share what your experience has been with, well, two things, kind of talk about Jobber and Nice Job and how you use that integration and send out the review requests, and maybe where you started with reviews before using it and where you are now, and how having those reviews like affects your business.
You know, one thing about our business is I try to keep it personal, and they say don't mix business and personal and everything like that. But realistically, if you want to run a business with a good reputation, it's going to become personal because you want to take care of clients as if they're not just a client, a dollar sign, they're family, they're friends, they could end up becoming one of your best friends. I mean, now look at you and I, and we just do business together, but we also do work for you, a couple times a month.
Yeah.
So when we started our Google page and everything like that, we kept it personal in the sense where, you first start a business, you're getting one client a day, two clients a day, stuff like that. So it's easy for me to, hey, thank you so much for choosing Keefer's junk removal. Thank you for trusting us with your business. If you were happy with the service we provided, would you mind leaving us a review? And then we would text them the link. That's great. It keeps it personal. But now when we're doing sometimes 5 to 7 jobs a day on top of maintaining our Facebook content and Google My Business page and, all the other things now and our admin stuff that we take care of, it makes it a little bit harder to personalize each and every single one of those texts. Otherwise, I'm going to be up all hours of the night, which normally I am anyway. But, with Nice Job, it has really made it to where, as a business owner, you have to learn the art of delegation. And in doing so, Nice Job has made it to where now every time we close out one of our invoices through Jobber, it automatically send a text to the client, like while I'm still standing in front of them of, hey, if you were happy with Keefer's junk removal, would you mind leaving us a review? The nice thing about it is once it sends that review, I want to say it sends 2 more updates over the span of like 2 weeks, but it's not, hey, you didn't leave us a review. Why not leave us a review now? It's, hey, here's just an update. And that has made it to where we know that we do such an impact to our clients that there are times that we're getting 5 to 10 reviews a week, So we went from, I want to say we were just over 100 reviews when we started using Nice Job. And I just checked this morning, we're at 244 5-star reviews, and you get a lot of people that are like, man, we're doing great. We're at 4.7 stars and this and that. And it's like, that's great. Don't get me wrong. But I want to strive to be better than that, and that's why we tell a lot of our clients, if I'm not 100% sure that you're going to be 110% happy with the job by the time we're done, I'm probably not going to take the job, because our reputation is everything to me. It's something that I've poured literal blood, sweat, and tears into building this business that I only want to offer 5-star service. And if we can't do that, then I'm clearly doing something wrong, because a lot of business owners are like, it's impossible to maintain a 5-star rating. Figure it out. I mean, there's clearly ways to do it. And, in the art of trying to stay humble with it is do better. If your guys are not treating clients the way that you would, then you need to pivot and make sure that your guys are treating your clients the way that you would. And I think that's become one of the hardest things for us is I would love to get off the truck, but in 3.5 years, I have not found anybody that I've brought onto our team yet. And it's a constant training session on how to treat people and what the expectations are of running this business. But nobody is going to run your business the way that you do. And at the same time, my wife tells me all the time, you cannot expect yourself out of everybody else. And that's a hard thing to swallow. When I walk up to a client's house and the first thing out of my mouth when they open their door is, wow, you have such a lovely home. It's something as simple as just building that relationship with the client that helps you maintain that 5-star rating. It's not just doing the job, collecting a check or cash or whatever, and then, okay, we'll see you on the next one. It's keeping it personable, making them feel like their hard-earned money that they decided to choose you as the contractor is going to be money well spent. Now, in the front of Jobber, when we first started, we were using QuickBooks to run everything. QuickBooks is great, but realistically, it's entry level. You can run your business with QuickBooks, but you're missing out on a lot. So with Jobber, we're able to send invoices, send quotes, send on the way texts. It sends them automated updates about their appointment. We can send a booking confirmation that has date, time, client's name, price, all these different things that we get compliments all the time. They're like, wow, you guys are so communicative. Absolutely. I mean, I try my hardest not to give people a time window, and we try to space our schedule so that this way, if I tell you I'm going to be there at 12:30, I'm going to be there about 12:55 or 12:25. Using Jobber, using Nice Job, learning how to delegate our time and energy towards the tools that are going to help us continue to grow, but keep things personal with our clients has made such an impact that, I appreciate you as well, because you're the one that turned us on to Jobber and Nice Job. And, it's really made a difference for us in general.
Yeah. It's funny, like as somebody, like you said, you guys service our business, multiple times a month now. doing like junk pickups for us because when we finish a job, we usually have a ton of paper, plastic, tape, buckets, just a bunch of stuff. And obviously, we don't leave that at our client's house. We take it with us and we bring it back to our shop, but then we've got to get rid of it. So you've been doing those pickups for us for a while now. And, when you started using Jobber, man, I can tell you, like, even like as a busy business owner, getting those updates, like, hey, reminder, you have an appointment with Keefer's junk removal. I'm like, oh, yeah, I got to be at the shop, Or, the other thing too is payments. Like, there's been a couple times where I'm just like, I'm busy. I'm, you come, you do the pickup, but I'm still running and doing my business and all that. And I just don't even think to make that payment on the spot. And then, but I get those automated reminders of like, hey, you've got an invoice with. And so I think from the standpoint is like people have busy lives. You don't want to be chasing people down for money, like, trying to pick up checks or go meet them to process their cards or whatever. And I think it probably, like, I'm just assuming for you, it probably gives you the ability like keep moving and then just know like Jobber is going to help you to get those payments. And my personal experience is I don't have a problem getting paid. Like Jobber actually tells you on your dashboard like what your typical timing is for getting paid on an invoice, and ours never has gone past a day. Like, so usually if we invoice a customer, they're either going to pay it the same day or the next day. So that's just nice because we don't have to chase down money, which is a good thing. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's really good. When you talk about 5-star reviews, I want to touch on this too because I just had this conversation with somebody. The way that I think about keeping a 5-star reputation is just taking extreme ownership. Like my favorite leadership book that I've ever written was written by two Navy SEALs, Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And the whole principle of that book is that, leaders take extreme ownership. If there's a problem, if something comes up in your team or in your business, you don't shift blame or try to, point your finger at somebody. You take ownership of that and you say, okay, well, I missed it there. So, like, for example, you could have a customer who's like, well, I thought that you said you were going to do this in your scope of work. And then you either at that point can argue with the customer and then potential and not do that work that they thought was going to be done and get a negative review because of it, because in that customer's eyes, you told them something, proposed value that you were going to give, and then you didn't give it. The way that I try to approach those situations is I try to think from the customer standpoint, what did I do as the owner of this business to not communicate properly or to create a proper expectation? And then I'll also feel it out. I might be like, I might initially say to them like, hey, I'm sorry that was a miscommunication, but no, that wasn't included. And then if they push back, I'm like, okay, they're going to stay consistent on this. Like,
Yeah.
now what's the next step? Well, hey, I'm not going to charge you full price. Could we just do it at cost? And if they still push back and they say something like, well, I don't want to pay for it, like I assume that this was included, then I have to like dig down in myself and say, okay, where did I miss it? What in my presentation or what I said or what I proposed to them make them think that this was like an included service? I can't control the way that my customer perceives things, right? But what I can do is take ownership for my own action. And so in those situations, I'm trying to like get to a resolution that the customer is going to feel comfortable with. And sometimes that means that I take a loss, but where I win is that I maintain my reputation. And so I didn't go to college for a really long time. I dropped out after a semester, but I remember I took a class on marketing. And one of the things that they talk about is opportunity cost. And it's like by virtue of doing one thing, you're going to possibly lose in another area. And so you have to like take that into consideration in business. It's like, okay, well, is me being right in this situation with this customer and maintaining that it wasn't included and hey, I'm not budging on this, is that worth the potential negative review or negative consequences that are going to come from it? And for me, it's just not. My reputation and trying to turn that into a positive is what I I try to do and how I approach those situations. And again, and that doesn't always mean that you're wrong as the business owner. But I shared this with another person. I was like, in marriage, like, think about if like you're in your marriage, how healthy would your marriage be if like both of you and your spouse just argued that until like you both thought you're right? And you just argue to the death. Like you're just like, no, I'm right. No, like how do we have successful and happy and healthy marriages? There's compromise, right? Like there's sometimes where we think we're right and we have to like bite our tongue or we have to swallow our pride and just say like, hey, like me being right is not worth our relationship, right? Me being right is not worth going to bed, angry with you, right? It's not worth saying, it's not worth not, making up or saying sorry or whatever. Does that make sense? Like,
Absolutely. I mean, that's what a lot of people don't realize too, is like you said, running a business is almost like maintaining your marriage.
right.
That compromise, my wife and I love that woman to death. I literally couldn't do what I do without her and her help. I am very hard headed when it comes to, if I feel strongly about a situation, in a lot of situations, I feel like I have to be right. And she's taught me that it's not about being right. Like in marriage, you're not supposed to view your partner, like you can view them as your sounding board. You can view them as someone to take advice from, but they're not the enemy. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of people forget that because, you know, I feel like as human beings, we have that internal like fight or flight. And for a lot of people, it's fight. But why do you want to fight with the one person who's wholeheartedly in your corner?
Yeah.
And in the same regard, I'm always going to fight for my business. But I see a lot of business owners, especially in the junk removal industry, that, a client wants to add a rug. And they're like, well, yeah, that'll be an extra 25. Take the rug. Like
Right.
it's something that like absolutely you should not work for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the big thing. And I think so many people get caught up on the I want to go above and beyond, but I can't work for free. Like
Yeah.
we have one client in particular that's been a client since we first got started, and we appreciate her. But unfortunately, like any business owner, when you first get started, you're still trying to figure out your pricing. It's never going to be perfect right off the bat.
Right.
So unfortunately, she is hooked on our pricing from when we first got started. And so
Yeah.
we've done slow little increases for certain size jobs and everything like that. But like you said, it's about compromise. And so I tell her, hey, if you can wait until we're in the area and I can throw it in with a load that I already have, we can maintain that pricing. But if I have to plan a separate trip to come out, it's going to be our minimum or it's going to be XYZ.
Yeah.
She's totally fine with that because then she still maintains that pricing. But,
Yeah.
if you're like, hey, I need you to clean out my entire house for $75,
Yeah.
we don't, I mean, I kind of hate to use this term, but we don't believe in, crackhead pricing. We run a business, we have costs, we have overhead.
Hmm.
But when it comes to, the 80-year-old woman that can't carry a dining room chair down to the dumpster, yeah, I've got some room.
Yeah.
Let me throw it in there for you. And
Yeah.
that is what kind of gives, like, on most of our reviews is, wow, these guys really do go above and beyond.
Yeah.
It's not that hard, but everybody, like, I feel like people are more worried about the dollar signs than the
Hmm.
reputation. And the
Yeah.
dollar signs come because of your reputation.
Yeah.
A lot of times it gets twisted, and that's where you see, I mean, listen, Facebook, Instagram, Google, Nextdoor, those platforms have become so huge and such a large sounding board for when people get pissed off.
Hmm.
And I've seen some of the reviews and some of the ways that people talk about contractors. I don't ever want to make it on that list.
Yeah. Right.
But that's where, going above and beyond and doing, it's almost like doing what's right.
Yeah. For
That
sure.
lady's not going to be able to carry that chair down. So why are you going to be like, well, ma'am, yeah, we can do that, but that's going to be an extra $50. I could also spend 2 extra minutes and break the legs off that chair, and it's almost like it's not even in the trailer.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's good. I mean, it's just like different, perspectives, I guess, from business owners. But I share a very similar perspective as you. And I even tell my guys, like, I have 4 crews now and 11 employees. And I tell them, I'm like, look, if you're on a job, like, do not call me if a customer says they want to add a door on. Just do the door. It's going to
Yeah.
take you 25, 30 minutes, to paint one side of a door. Like, please, like, don't, like, I'm going to have to stop what I'm doing, look at it, send them a bid, see if they approve the price, get it sent back. I'm like, just do
It's
it.
going to
Like,
take you longer than the 30 minutes for them to just paint the door.
right, right. I even like I had to say I try to tell my guys, it is okay for you to just be genuinely good people working for me. Like,
Right.
I'll never forget, I had this job we were doing in Port St. John, and it was an exterior repaint, and we were in the middle of that job, and the neighbor next door was a older woman who was she was single. I think she was widowed, and she was trying to move heavy furniture out of her house. And so my guys ended up going over there and helping her move stuff out of her house on the clock, right? So some people like might get bothered by that. Me, I didn't find out about it until the end of the job, because, like, scheduling wise, I was like, hey guys, where are we at? I thought we'd be done with this job, and they were like, yeah, sorry, like, we're finishing up today. During the job, we ended up helping the neighbor. It took some time to help her move some furniture and things like that. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, so my customer was really happy with their job. The neighbor was happy that we helped them. But this is where it came full circle. A little over a year later, after completing that neighbor's house, that lady needed her home painted, and she called us and she said, hey, when you guys were painting my neighbor's house, your crew came over and helped me move furniture, and I really appreciated that. I need to get my house painted. Can you guys give me a quote? And we ended up getting the job. But I mean, it's just like, not everything has to have a dollar sign on it. And I often like to, like, think, how would I want to be treated? Like, if I was, if I had you, John, at my house doing, a junk removal, and you're like doing this large load, and I was like, hey, here's this bucket of trash, like, can you throw that in there? And you're like, yeah, it's going to be an extra $75. I'd be like, geez, like,
Yeah.
so, like, there is a corner right there that would fit like, okay, like, now I'm not saying, like, there's a line to that, right? There's like, well, if I was like, hey, can you take my boat with you? Like, okay. And if I expected that as a freebie, like, that would be a little bit crazy. But so I understand that there's a boundary to that. But when it's something small, it's like, don't, the way that I think about it is, I'm like, don't be petty, like,
Yeah.
or, just greedy, like, just, those little things, I think, come back to you, and you may not see the return in that moment, but the return is me being really happy with your service, and then telling all of my neighbors, like, hey, this guy is great. He runs a really great business. He has integrity, honest, shows up, does a great job, and he really takes care of his customers. And then I want to refer you to, like, everybody. So I think in that moment, all you think about is, like, that dollar sign, but you don't think about, like, what the effects are that you can't see, if that makes sense.
So I
So,
want to touch on this real quick. So, like you had said about, everyone makes it about the dollar sign, right? So, one thing that we do differently than a lot of, in a sense, more or less the larger corporations, is we do everything based on a free on-site estimate. And
hmm
we do the entire county of Brevard, we do Volusia County, and we even do parts of Orange County. But what a lot of people have told me is, they're like, yeah, this junk removal came out to give me a quote and they charged me $75, and their price was so high I couldn't afford it, but I still had to pay the $75. Okay.
yeah,
Yes, fuel is expensive. We have overhead, we have costs, everything like that.
yeah,
Estimates has always been one of those things where the way that I view it is, if you cannot afford the fuel to go give an in-person interaction with somebody, you shouldn't be in business anyways. If that $20,
yeah,
$30 in fuel is going to make or break your business,
yeah.
that's not right, in my opinion. So I want to say it was Tuesday, we had a lady reach out to us, and she's got a sub-zero fridge and a sub-zero freezer in her house. They're these massive, like, built-in fridge freezer units.
hmm
And, I told the lady, I was like, listen, our big thing is about transparency. I want to come out and look at it. I want to see how they're put in. because, a lot of people are afraid to admit if they've never done a certain type of job. But
Hmm.
you have to get to that point where you do it for the first time so you can learn. And a lot of times that comes at a discounted rate to the client, being on YouTube, trying to figure out how to do it, And so I went over there to the lady's house and I was there for 45 minutes trying to figure out if we could even do the job, if we had the right tools, if it was something that we could even physically do to get out.
Hmm.
And mind you, I mean, this is a $1.2 million house. Like,
Right.
they probably wouldn't have had a problem paying me for my time, but it's not about that. Because
Hmm.
I even told the lady, I was like, listen, I would love to attempt to do this job, but I will tell you right now, if we cannot successfully complete it, I am not sending you an invoice. Because now, like they say in business, knowledge is power, and realistically in the real world as well. So by me going over there and spending 45 minutes, not only have I built a relationship with that client before we've even agreed to a job, but they see it as, wow, this guy took time out of his day to make sure that I don't get taken advantage of. And that's one of our biggest things is I don't ever want a client to feel like the money that they're spending, they got taken advantage of at the end of the job.
Right.
So after the 45 minutes, I'm just like, man, I'm really just not 100% confident that I'll be able to get this out. What a lot of us business owners do is sometimes we have to call on people that have experience in that field more than we do. So I reached out to my buddy Michael, who used to be a delivery guy for an appliance company. And I said, Michael, listen, here's what I got going on. I don't know if I can get the units out because once the units were put in, the homeowners did a second layer of tile flooring, which has now made it to where your gap where you can remove a fridge is now even smaller.
Yeah.
So I was like, Michael, listen, man, I will pay you regardless. Can you
Hmm.
meet me at this client's house on Friday to see if we can even get these out? And he's like, yeah, dude, absolutely. Now, if we can't get it out, technically I'm going to take a loss because I have to pay him. But at the
Hmm.
same time, you're never going to know unless you try. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I'm super paranoid about liability. If it's going to damage their floor, damage their walls, someone once told me, well, what's the issue? You have liability insurance. That's fantastic. Doesn't mean I want to use it.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, man. It's you have used this saying a lot, and it's something I've always held on to is putting people before profit.
Hmm.
And by me spending 45 minutes and building that relationship, they already told me, they're like, even if we can't get these out, you're going to be our junk guy. That's
Hmm.
perfect. I really appreciate that. That's amazing. So if I would have charged them for XYZ, what is the $50 going to do? To me, the relationship is worth more than that $50 would have ever been.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly what, I think it was a story about Costco and then another similar business model. But anyway, I heard a story recently where it was kind of talking about that whole principle of like, never putting profit before people. Always put people first. And it talked about these two organizations. I do remember that one was Costco, and like Costco ended up thriving and growing and really succeeding and all that. But one of the major reasons why was because of Costco's stance on like serving people. And it was like, there was the emphasis that like, if we take care of people, then like everything else follows suit and like takes care of itself, right? And that's how I'm like, I sink or swim, that is going to be the foundation that I stand on as a business owner. So if I can't, I always, I'll tell my guys, I'll tell anybody, like, I want to be successful. Heck, I want to make more money. I'd love to, like, I'd love to make a lot more and be able to take home a bigger personal income and all of that from my business. But I always say I don't want to do it at the expense of like some really core things. And one of those things is people. Like, I don't want to feel like I have to treat people in a bad way, step on people or anything like that to where I get to like this point of success and I look back and I feel like man I had to like step on people or treat people wrong or do things dishonestly or whatever in order to get here. I'd rather fail than get to that successful point in my life and feel like I had to treat people unfairly or do things in a way that I wouldn't be proud of. And
Absolutely.
what I really just believe like deep inside my heart is that if I just keep that as the foundation of how I do business, then even though yes, I'm still going to face challenges, there's still going to be hard times. I just feel like I'm going to be successful and my business will continue to grow and thrive. And I think that it will be because we did take care of people and put people first. So, it like my business is still in process, we still face challenges, but that'll always be like how I try to position myself. So that kind of leads me to the next thing to talk about. Before the show we talked about being authentic in business challenges. And for me, I've been in business going on 10 years. This August we will officially be in our 10th year of business. And I've faced so many challenges in that, and I'm still facing challenges to this day. It's funny you mentioned liability insurance, and for the first time in 10 years, am in a situation where I may have to use my liability insurance. And that's one of those things where it's like, you have to take extreme ownership of the situation.
Yep.
You have to face, the fact that there was a mistake that was made, and then just own it. And so it really sucks. I'm like looking at the situation. I'm like, and it's like, it sucks so bad. But in short, what happened, I'll share this story and then we can kind of like just jump in and talk about different challenges. But since you brought up the liability, it made me think about this. So we started an exterior painting job recently, and we were already like delayed by rain. It kept raining us out. The job was taking longer than we had anticipated, and we were just trying to get it done. And so we were almost there. Like we were almost done with this job. And my lead guy for this job ended up he was going out of town over the weekend and wasn't going to be back until Monday or Tuesday. And he was the lead on the job. Well, the guy who worked with my lead, he decided that he wanted to be helpful and try and get this job done so he could get on to the next one. And he decided to spray the soffits, the fascia, the gutters, and everything on this home. Now, with painting, like you can't just spray the soffits and the fascia and the gutters. You have to shield them, because what will happen is as you're spraying that paint, even though you don't really like see it, like as you're spraying, that spray is going up, and then the wind carries it and it settles, right? And so anyway, the next or that day, Chris gets onto the job and he's like, my goodness, like what have you done? This one employee was trying to be helpful, but he blew it big time. And he oversprayed this roof, and it wasn't just a little bit, it was pretty bad. And like I said, I've been in business for going on 10 years and I've never had this happen. And I was just like, and I went to the job and I'm looking at it, and we've been trying to get it off. We've had a little bit of success, but we found a way to get it off, but the way to get it off is going to take us so long that we're just like, the cost that I'm going to incur for labor to have a guy out there or a couple guys out there working on it to get it clean is almost like, it's like, what makes more sense? Like, to be wasting time having my guys out there trying to clean it, or just use our insurance and replace the shingles that need to be replaced. But what adds insult to injury is it's a brand new roof, dude. Like literally the roof got put on and then we started painting. And so, but it's funny because it's like in that moment, it's super frustrating, right? I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. But as a business owner, like part of our growth, I think, is facing those challenges and then seeing how we handle them. And so in this moment, like my guys are even like, oh, we're not replacing this roof. I'm like, look, if that's what it takes to make this situation right, that's what we're gonna do. And it sucks. Like, dude, I don't want to replace somebody's roof. Like, dude, like what a kick in the nuts, but at the same time, like I have to understand, like as a business owner, I have to take full responsibility and ownership of that situation, even though it sucks. And I think what sets like great business owners apart from, those who are not so great is the ability to like own those mess ups, to take responsibility and to take ownership. And so, I could make excuses. I could I could even approach it from this standpoint of like, maybe we clean it. Cause I even told my guys, I said, look, if we clean this and we think it's okay, but the customer comes back and says like, hey, that's not good enough. Like, I can't argue with them. Like, at that point, it's like, hey, the customer is right no matter what. So
Yeah.
if he says, oh, that'll suffice and he's happy, like, thank the Lord for mercy. But if he comes back and says, hey, look, it's a brand new roof. I appreciate that you guys tried to clean it, but it needs to look like a brand new roof.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to bite the bullet. But anyway, so, it's like the reason why I share that is I think we, like, especially in a social media world where, business owners are out there, they're looking at business content and they're like, man, look at all these guys' wins. And man, this guy's doing so great. And he doesn't have any problems and he's just stacking up the dough and got tons of profit and he's living life big. It's like, no, like, people are not as quick to share their failures and their mistakes. So anyway, as we were talking about before the show, obviously I know some of the challenges that you face over the last year. In whatever way you want to, what are some of those challenges and how have you overcome them? What are you doing? Maybe encourage some people who might be facing challenges in their business and kind of encourage them to keep pushing on.
Man, I love this question because I've got stories. The hardest thing, and it may seem so small, but one of the hardest things I've learned with junk removal is the amount of YouTubers that I made $1 million doing junk removal, and I made $2,000 today, and everyone's like, wow, you took home $2,000. No, there are some days that, depending on how you built your scale for profit and everything like that, you may only take home $800 because the job took longer, or one of your guys gets sick and he has to go home, or you get a flat tire at the landfill that's non-repairable, so that's going to cost me $230. And but you've got all these guys that talk about, like you said, they talk about all the wins, but they never want to talk about the losses because that affects the image of how great the industry is. Listen,
Yeah.
junk removal is amazing. It has provided so far an incredible life for myself and my family. We've been able to do so much for so many people, but there are a lot of things as a business owner that people don't want to talk about because it's not cool. It's not going to look like you're this successful guy because so many people out in the world are caught up on their image, right? We talk about reputation, but then there's also your image, right?
Yeah.
And so we had bought a 2024 Chevy Silverado 2500 HD. It was a gas truck. And we're like, perfect. We got something pretty much brand new. We're going to be able to tackle all these jobs. What's the worst that can happen, right? That's the worst thing you can ever say. And in the span of 2.5 years of owning this truck, the AC compressor went out at 34,000 miles. The transmission had to be fully rebuilt within around 50,000 miles. Then after they rebuilt the transmission, then they ended up having to put a whole new transmission in it. And, everyone's like, well, it's under warranty. That's fine. Yeah, I'm not necessarily coming out of pocket per se for the repairs, but I use that vehicle every single day to run my business.
Yeah.
Well, then it's, all right, cool. I'll just go get a rental. We don't have any rentals local. Okay, so what are my options? Oh, you got to go an hour south to get a rental for a vehicle compatible for what you had so you can keep running your business. Okay, we'll make it happen. Oh, well, we don't have one available for 4 or 5 days. That's not gonna work. I've got jobs for the next 4 or 5 days, so the biggest thing in business is you have to learn how to pivot. And I think a lot of people haven't learned that art, and it's something that we're constantly working on. But, so we went and rented a U-Haul truck, and we're paying mileage and everything like that, and we're taking less of a profit, but still making sure that our clients are taken care of. And so we finally got rid of that truck. But before we did, we're like, you know what? We're in an okay spot. Let's go buy a second vehicle off of Marketplace. Again, worst thing you can do. And so we go and buy this truck for like $8,000, and we're like, perfect. We've got a strong running truck, needs, a couple little things, whatever. And we're like, at least this truck can kind of float us through all the problems that we're having with the Chevy, and then we can get rid of that truck. Well, then we end up having to dump about $10,000 into the second truck, and that's what a lot of people don't realize is, like you said, they see the jobs that you do, and they may have had you quote one of those jobs. So they know, in a sense, the kind of money that you're making on some of these jobs. And, thankfully, we just sold that second truck yesterday. And with what we paid for it plus repairs, we were like $18,000 into a truck that there were times on some of these repairs, we didn't have that money necessarily allocated to cover those repairs. So then we're using the company credit card, and okay,
Yeah.
we got to make sure that that's paid off within the next month so we don't get hit with, 20 something percent interest. And
Yeah.
running a business is just constantly learning how to properly and legally move money around,
Yeah.
and I will never say that I regret getting into business, because the life that it has built for my wife and kids is, I get to come home and see it every day. I
Yeah.
see how happy they are, but I also get to see the fact that, dad was up at 5 o'clock in the morning and getting home at 7:30 at night. But the first thing I
Hmm.
do is say hi and give a hug and kiss to my wife and kids. I wouldn't
Hmm.
change it. But running a business is not easy. It's not for the weak. It's not for, oh, I'm just looking for a little side hustle. If you're doing it as a side hustle, great, man. Go make that extra cash. Good for you. We're not the same. And that's not to, poo poo on anybody for trying to do a side hustle, but
Hmm.
that's where we're, same thing with in the painting industry. I'm not going to attempt to compete with the $50 guy, because then it just becomes a race to the bottom. And
Hmm.
I don't want to be viewed as the cheap guy. I want to be viewed as the guy that you feel confident in paying my price, because I'm worth it, my work ethic is worth it, and the quality of service that we deliver is.
Yeah.
But running a business is hard. It's expensive. There's still things that I'm learning, and I fully understand now why they say that the first 5 years is where you're gonna learn if you're gonna make it or not.
Yeah.
And we're 3.5 years in, and there's days I'm sitting there scratching my head. I'm just like, I don't know how we're gonna do it.
And
You know?
here's the thing. I don't think that businesses fail in that first well, yeah, I think they say the first 3 to 5 years, like 90% of all businesses fail or something like that. I don't think that it's that they fail in a sense that like they had no option but to close or whatever. I think sometimes it's like it's the owner's capacity to handle this stress and the ability to, like you said, pivot and adapt in the moment to whatever that challenge is that they're facing. Like, and this is why I say that. I'll put this into perspective. So in 2022, I mean, some of my story, but in 2013 employees, I mean, multiple trucks financed. So all of my fleets, all of my vehicles that I had, none of them were paid for. They were all financed. So here I'm sitting with like 500 to 600 plus dollar payments on all of these work vehicles, and I had so when we sell a job, we take a deposit, and we had like, I don't know, probably anywhere between 250 to $300,000 worth of work that was scheduled on our books. So we had already received deposits and had that work scheduled on the books. So everything's going good. Like in the beginning of 2022, business is booming. We're growing like 50. Everything's on the up and up. I'm like on cloud nine. I'm like, I've arrived. I'm doing everything right. I figured it out. Like I've got a sales rep. I'm not doing any of the sales. I got a production manager. I'm not doing any of the production management. I've got all my crews. I'm literally just like managing everything. I have a full-time admin who's answering phones, scheduling estimates, scheduling jobs, doing all the back end work. I'm literally like feeling like I'm on top of the world. And we're on pace to do over $1 million in revenue. And I was like, I figured it out. And then May of 2022, the revenue just tanked. Couldn't explain it to you 100%. Couldn't tell you exactly why. We were using, I know at the time, which we don't do this anymore. At the time, we were using Thumbtack was our main resource for leads, and so I'm using Thumbtack, and I'm bringing in all those leads. I'm spending a lot of money for those leads, but it's working. But then like the leads were getting bad. There wasn't as many. I don't know if that was just like a change on Thumbtack's part. I know they did change like how you bought leads back then. It went from like you set a budget and you get X amount of leads based on what your budget was, to like they changed it to like a pay to play kind of thing. It was like the more you are willing to spend per lead. So like if you were willing to spend $500 on a lead, but another company was only willing to spend $300 on that lead, whoever was willing to pay more for the lead would get the lead. So our cost per acquisition just skyrocketed. So then business, like I said, tanked. And like we had cash reserves at the time, and I had the ability to like weather a bad month, right?
Right.
Had that bad month, and I was like, "Oh, that sucked. That was a tough month, but it was just kind of a fluke. We'll rebound. We'll bounce back." Well, then it was another bad month. And then I was like, "Man, this is getting really bad." Now I'm getting scared. I'm like, "Dude, I'm barely able to make payroll this week." Well, then it was like another bad month. Now I didn't make payroll. Now I was like telling guys like, "Hey, you've got to finish this job today so we can get paid so I can pay you." Well, my guys back then, they're like, "Well, we're not coming to work then." I was like, "Dude, like just go to work and finish the job. We'll get paid and I'll pay you. Like it's as easy as that." "No,
Yeah.
pay us and then we'll go." I'm like, "I can't pay you until the job gets done." So nobody prepares you for like those situations in business, right? But what ended up happening ultimately is I lost all of my employees. So all 13 employees I lost. It was down to just me, right? If you know anything about me, I can paint, but I can't do everything that my guys who like that's what they do like for their trade, right? And I definitely couldn't do all the work that we had on our schedule by ourselves. So anyway, like in that moment, like I felt like so much pressure, so much weight. And like those are the things like not everybody talks about, right? Not everybody talks about like those moments where I felt like I was at risk of these vehicles defaulting and like being repossessed. And so I was trying to sell them as quick as I could, trying to like take out loans to pay off negative equity and just doing whatever I could to survive. But what I did in that season is I told myself, I was like, look, I only fail if I quit. Like, yes, this sucks. This is so hard. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to bed every night and I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm just going to live out the day, right? Stack some wins and try to get my head back on the pillow, like without dying somehow. And just wake up the next day and just try to stack wins again. And that was it. I was like, if I just it took time, like, right? But it was just like, hey, I only fail when I quit, right? So I think that's what you're going to face challenges as a business owner. It's like inevitable. And sometimes you don't have control of what's about to come your way. Like who could have planned COVID, right?
Yeah.
Like how many businesses failed during COVID because they just like, maybe it was a lack of resources, or maybe it was like just a lack of ability to adapt and pivot or whatever. But there's going to be things that come your way that you can't even plan or prepare for. And it's like, well, you're going to find out what you're made of. So I was in business during COVID. I literally thought that was going to be another time I went out of business, but I didn't. So anyway, I want to be respectful of your time, Don. I just realized it's almost 9, but yeah, just business challenges, man. You have anything else you want to add to that?
So I do want to add this, and I said this to you the other day. I actually texted it to you. But I want to say this more to the listeners, to the business owners that are just really going through it. One thing that we have really tried to hold on to is you stress a lot for someone who always figures it out. And I think as business owners, we really forget that, okay, in the moment, whatever you're going through, like this is the worst thing and I don't know how I'm going to overcome this. But then somehow you overcome it and you get through the job and you get
Yeah.
through the tough client and you get through the problematic issue. But then there's going to be another one and
hmm
you're going to get through that one. But like you said, if you just, throw your hands up and that's it, I'm done, I quit, I can't do this anymore, you're never going to overcome it. And, we have had situations where we're just like, I can't do this anymore.
hmm
And listen, we're in Florida. We have the Florida heat,
Yeah.
and there's days I think I text my wife at least once a day. It is so freaking hot outside. But
Right.
somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
And the nasty jobs that we do with bed bugs and fleas and literal feces, like, and my wife's like, there's no way I could do that. That's horrible. But if I don't do it, someone else is going to,
Yeah.
so it's sometimes you got to lace up those bootstraps and pull your big boy pants up and you got
Yeah.
to do it, but you always have to remember that for someone who stresses a lot, which I stress a lot, you're
Yeah.
always going to figure it out. You just can't give up. You just got to keep
Yeah.
going and you got to do it.
Yeah. Doing it, I mean, at the end of the day, like that, I think that's what makes successful people, right? It's the people who, even in the midst of adversity, challenges, and things like that, they just have something inside of them that says, like, hey, I'm just not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. I'll figure this out. And,
Yep.
and I think that's where, like, the businesses that are around for 30 plus years, and or more, those are the businesses that stand out because they're the ones that when the challenges come, they figure it out. They adapt, they pivot, they overcome. And so I think that's just a huge part of it. And I think, I will say this, one of the reasons why I say learn, like that's one of our missions, is to help business owners learn, is because I think equipping, you don't have to, like, everything doesn't have to be reactionary, right? You don't have to figure out everything in the moment. You can learn a lot in leadership and business, and then when those challenges come, you're more equipped to handle them. Like, it's a lot easier if you've educated yourself on a bunch of different stuff, and then when you hit that moment, you're like, okay, well, at least I know, like, what to do, right? So I think that's really important as business owners. We need to constantly be educating ourselves and
And don't be
trying
afraid
to
to ask
learn.
for help either. Too many
Yeah,
people are
yeah.
scared to ask for help because they think it's a sign of weakness or failure. Dude, I can't tell you the amount of junk removal companies just in our area that bid some of the same jobs that I have to bid, where we're going, in a sense, up against each other.
Hmm.
If your mission at the end of the day is just making sure that the client is taken care of, that is all I care about. Do I want to win the job and get the money and stack the dough, like you said? Absolutely. Every business owner wants to do that. But how
Hmm.
are you going to take care of the client if you cannot physically complete the job, but you
Hmm.
also don't want to be the guy that leaves the job unfinished?
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. I mean, I'm about to do an episode here in the near future with a guy in my industry who's local, and the whole topic of the interview is going to be about collaboration over competition. And because we both, so like I live here in Titusville, he lives down in Palm Bay area, and we refer one another work all the time. Sometimes, like, if I can't get to a job within somebody's time frame, I'm like, well, would I rather like this customer potentially get ripped off by somebody else, or would I rather give them a referral to somebody that I know who's in my industry, who I know has integrity, who does honest work and quality work? I'd
Yep.
rather have that customer taken care of and be taken care of by a professional company, even if they're my competition, than to have them screwed over, because that paints a bad picture for our industry as a whole. So yeah, I that's something that I believe firmly in. Like, I can't tell you, there's guys that I've helped start their business here locally in Titusville. And like this week, I had a customer call in, hey, I need this job done in the next 2 weeks. I was like, there's not a chance. I'm booked out until the end of August. I said, but here's this guy, call him. He can probably get to you. He's a former employee of mine. I helped him start his business. He'll do a great job. Give him a call. So,
Right.
yeah, it's just, there's enough work to go around for everybody. And yes, we want to, like, be competitive. But at the end of the day, I think you just got to realize, like, don't let your ego and your pride, like, get in the way of a customer being taken care of.
Yep.
Like, I'm not going to try to, like, sell the customer on something that I can't do. Like, what if I was to tell that customer, like, yeah, I'll get it done in 2 weeks, and then try to find a crazy way to get it done and then not be able to get it done? Well, what help has that been? So anyway, hey, look, I'm not in a hurry. I've got a few more minutes. I don't know if you do. I know we were going to talk about the whole stay-at-home mom thing. Do you
Yeah.
have a few minutes, or do you need to run?
For you, man, I got all the time in the world.
I appreciate that. Let's, because this is a new season I'm in, let's just take like 5 minutes to talk about this. So my one of the things that I had mentioned to you is, like, every business owner is in, like, a different season of life. When my wife and I found out we were having our third child, we knew we were going to have to address this whole, like, 2 kids in daycare, how expensive that was going to be, the time she was going to be at work, and all of that. And we recently decided to have her just stay home. She was supposed to go back to work in early June, and now she's a stay-at-home mom. So anyway, I know that's like, can you talk about, maybe share your perspective as a business owner on the unique challenges of being a business owner, right? Like, I love how Dave Ramsey says entrepreneurs are crazy people, like we literally go out and kill and drag home what we're going to eat every day, as like a little metaphor there. But just talk about that. Talk about maybe the challenges, but also the benefits of that.
Anybody who knows my wife or has had I'm not going to say the opportunity, the privilege to meet my wife, knows how incredible of a woman she is. And, everyone wants to give me all the credit for running my business and how successful we've become. But they don't see the fact that my wife is in the background. Literally, while I'm keeping the business afloat, she's keeping me afloat. And,
Right. Yeah.
she pours into me as much, if not more, as I pour into my business. And,
Hmm.
when we were both working for the local Walmart distribution center when I started my business, and, when I first brought to her, I was like, hey, I think I want to start a junk removal business. And she's like, what? Like, you're just going to pick up trash all day? And I was like, yeah, I have no idea, And she's like, okay. Let's do it, And I would make comments about, one day I can go full time and this will be our sole source of income. And she's like, pump the brakes. Like, you're 2 months in. Like, let's just be rational here. And my wife's a very rational thinker about everything, which keeps me grounded because I like to go way outside the box. But, we were both working full time. We had babysitters for the kids and everything like that. And the business, in a sense, started to take off a little bit more than it had. And we kind of got to the point and we're like, it's getting really expensive to keep paying for babysitters. And thankfully, like, she has an incredible family. I have an incredible family. Like, everyone's always willing to pitch in and help. But like, the reality is that it's just more and more money going out than it, in a sense, it's worth for her to keep working.
Hmm.
And so we made it wasn't an easy decision. We made the tough decision for her to stay home while I
Hmm.
worked my full-time job and ran the business. And I was working 7 days a week for 7 months straight.
Hmm.
And there were times that we're looking and we're not getting any calls. And literally the first week that I went full time with the business, the phone didn't ring once.
Right.
And
Yeah.
my wife she's like, did we make the wrong decision? She's like, I believe in you, but what's happening? And I was like, yeah, I couldn't tell you. I'm just as scared,
Right.
And so, but seeing the love and affection that she has as a mother for our children
Hmm.
is, dude, I couldn't have picked a better woman to build a life with.
Yeah.
And I truly do not believe that my business would be as successful as it is without her.
Oh
And
yeah.
so she became a stay-at-home mom, and she had gotten her AA degree in teaching and education.
Hmm.
And she comes to me and she's like, I think I want to homeschool. And I'm like, unfortunately, I fell under the stigma of, gosh, the weird homeschool kids, But
Right.
honestly,
Yeah.
it was because I was uneducated, and I'm not afraid to admit that, because the more people that I get a chance to educate on the fact that, like, homeschool kids honestly have just as much opportunity as kids in public school.
Yeah.
My kids go to co-ops and meet other kids in the community, and they've formed best friends. And I was like, well, what about high school? Like, do they get a prom? Yeah, they can attend prom at the local high school, And her being a stay-at-home mom has been one of the best but hardest things
Hmm.
I've ever had to do besides running a business, because now it's not like we had a slow month, I can pay myself a little bit less and we can rely on her income. Like, there is no other income.
Right, dude. Yeah,
Like,
for
if
sure.
I'm not out there making it, nobody's gonna save you,
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like, we do our very hardest to not live off of credit cards, and if we can't afford it, we don't buy it,
Yeah.
And that's been one of our biggest saving graces is, can't afford it, don't buy it.
Yeah.
But man, it is, we've had a couple months this year already that we just hit our minimum for the month. We didn't make any money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, but we've put in kind of fail safes that, okay, we hit our minimum, things are tight, bills are paid. But one thing that we have always maintained is that we never let it show to the kids.
Yeah.
And when I walk in the door, I don't care if I got my rear end kicked 7 ways to Sunday that day.
Hmm.
I'm not a perfect parent. I lose my temper. I get frustrated and I get overstimulated. And sometimes, listen, at 31 years old, I can't process and regulate my emotions, you know? So it's hard to tell my 7-year-old and my 5-year-old, hey, don't do that. You need to regulate your emotions. Well, Dad, you're literally yelling at me right now, you know?
Right.
And, but
That's so funny.
I know for a fact that I can be gone 12 to, we've had 17-hour days,
Hmm.
that no matter what is happening in my workday, my kids are loved, my kids are happy, my kids are getting the best education possible because of my wife. Dude, I wouldn't change anything about it. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard sometimes. I don't want to sugarcoat it and make it like, oh, if you can make your bills, let your wife be a stay-at-home mom. Like, that was a really hard decision that we had to sit there and figure out.
Yeah.
And, the amount of times that I'll come home and I'll look at her and I'm just like, what am I doing wrong? Like, nothing's working, no marketing, no networking events, no, and a lot of people believe that knocking on doors is the way to go.
Hmm.
I physically can't bring myself to go knock on somebody's door and say, hey, I know you've got a really busy day, but let me tell you why you should spend your money with me. you know and because for me, like, I get people that tell me all the time, they're like, you need to go knock on doors, and I go,
Hmm.
let me tell you why I'm not going to do that. The
Hmm.
amount of times that I call my wife throughout the day and I hear the kids screaming in the background, and she's telling me she's doing laundry, and imagine when an Amazon driver, we all have Amazon that comes to our house, they come and knock on your door, or you get a door knocker and they're like, hey, we're doing roofs in the area. Well, that's cool. My wife is in the middle of doing laundry, doing the dishes, the kids are screaming and fighting. The last thing she wants to do is hear why you're here to sell her a service. So, like we talk about,
Yeah.
I put myself in other people's shoes of, yes, if I knocked on doors, I would probably have a lot more business. But I also feel like it would negatively impact my business a little bit because of social media and the amount of people that say, did you know that this guy was knocking on doors and wasting people's time? And listen, it's proven it works for certain businesses.
Hmm.
I see what my wife goes through and I can't do that to them.
Yeah. 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 There's a few things you talked about, and I just want to hit on these. The the reality is, like, so maybe if you're listening to this, you're in, a listener, and maybe you're in a season of having to decide, like, hey, do I go full time with my business? Does my spouse stay home with the kids, or do I pay for daycare? One of the things that I heard just all throughout your conversation, John, was you have to choose your heart, right? It's like
Yeah.
both things are going to be challenging in different ways. But what I had in this season where Sammy and I were trying to decide, like, okay, is she going to stay home or not? I was talking to someone who I really respect about it, and his wife, stayed home with their kids. Now his kids are like grown and moving out of the house and all of that. So, but I asked him, I said, what advice or wisdom do you have? He goes, dude, it's going to be hard either way. He's like, but you'll never regret your wife being the one who raises your kids and spends time with your kids and instills your values. And he's like, and you'll figure it out financially. Like, you just will. It's not going to be easy. He's like, but you will figure it out. And so that was encouraging to me. I was like, you know what, yeah, we just need to do this, like, make the decision and we'll figure it out. And that doesn't mean that it's easy, but and we didn't take like a just like we used wisdom. Like, I think I told you before the show, we sat down for like 4 hours and we went over like a few months of bank statements line by line, looking at finances, seeing where we could cut spending, and like evaluating whether certain expenses were needed or not. And then we also evaluated, like, hey, if you stay home, how much money are we gonna save? We're not gonna be paying $1,900 a month for daycare. We're not gonna be paying $9,000 a year for travel expenses, gas that you're spending getting to work, tolls, maintenance on your vehicle, all of these different things. And so once we calculated it all, we were like, wow, like, we would actually save a pretty good amount of money, to where like what I'm making now and bringing home through the business will basically suffice. Right now, we had to change a lot of things. Like, I used to eat out a lot because of Like my wife was working full time. I was having to like go get the kids, and like it was just a timing thing of not really having as much time. So it was like choosing like family time over cooking every meal or something. Now like Sammy cooks every meal. I come home to eat lunch, so yeah, there's just a lot of money saved there. But anyway, you figure it out and you make a way for it to work. So if you're listening to this and you're contemplating it, I just want to encourage you, make the jump. You'll figure it out. And then just two things that other notes I wrote down while you're talking, and then we'll kind of bring this to a close. You had mentioned, like, yes, business is stressful for us, right? We get home, our kids, we don't want them to be like the recipient of that. So we have to like try to like regulate our emotions and regulate what we're going through. And in the same, I love that you mentioned like seeing like from your child's perspective that, we can't sit there and say, hey, regulate your emotions. And we know how challenging it is for us as adults sometimes, right? And I was just talking to my wife about this a couple of days ago, because, we're trying to understand how when I discipline our son who is 6, he's very quick to like fall in line and listen, and it's like manageable, right? Like, yeah, he might like pout or whatever, but it's manageable. Like I can get through to him. She like feels like she has no control of him sometimes. Like he'll like lose it and like do stuff that she's just like, I don't even know how to control him. Like he did this and he did that. And I said, babe, sometimes you have to focus less on you being right about the correction and try to see something from his perspective, right? And so like when I got home, I got down on his level, I looked him in his little face, and it was actually a situation with him and his sister. His sister did something to him. She got corrected, but then because he was upset, he tried to hit his little sister, but then Emmett got in trouble, and he felt like he was getting in trouble for something that Everly did. And then he was like, I'm the big brother, I'm always getting in trouble, nobody else gets in trouble, it's always my fault. And like I just got down on his level and I said, buddy, it's tough being the oldest, isn't it? And he said, yeah. And I said, you feel like it's always your fault, like you're held to like a higher responsibility because like you're older and you understand. He's like, yeah. And like, so I just, in that moment, I tried to understand, like, where is my son coming from? Where is he at mentally right now? And how is he processing this situation? And the way that he was processing it was that he was getting in trouble for something his sister did because he was the big brother. So anyway, it's just, I love that you brought that up, because I think it's like, it's empathy, right? It's like trying to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes or perspective. And I think we can use that as business owners too, to understand where our customers are coming from, where our employees are coming from, our spouses, to see their perspectives. And that really changes things. And then door knocking. Oh, go ahead.
But see, I want to add too, like my wife and I, we're actually opposite of you and Sammy. Is my wife helps keep me grounded because, there are times that we'll talk about something and I'll go to discipline the kids and she's like, hold on, and I'm just, typical male behavior. I'm instinctually like, what, are you calling me a bad parent? Like, and she's like, no, that's not the case at all. But remember, I'm home with them all day. I see what works and what doesn't. And that's been a really hard adjustment for me from doing the now stay at home mom and everything like that, because I'm like, well, we're equal, we're partners. Why, I tend to get very defensive, and that's a downfall of mine, but I'm not afraid to admit that. But, so I take it as like, well, we're both parents, like we're on the same page, right? And she's like, no, absolutely, but you're wrong. Like we need to pivot that. And my daughter, she's going to be 8, and she is so, not even in a bad way, but she's so emotional and empathetic, and she doesn't want to do anything wrong. And like the thing that it has been an adjustment for me is with how emotional she is. She feels things so deeply that, I mean, Brandon, you run a business just like I do. There are days that the business has taken literally everything out of my tank. I have nothing left. But you're also a parent just as much as you are a business owner, but being a parent is always going to come first. So even if your tank is on empty, figure it out, because I would rather, and this is something that I'm really working on it, trying to put myself in the shoes of a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old of, for me, I'm just like, guys, it's not a big deal. What are you freaking out about? But then for
Mm-hmm.
them, it's literally the end of the world because this is the hardest thing that they're going through right now.
Yeah.
And, so for my daughter, my wife has told me, she's like, listen, she just wants to be heard. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of talking over her and, doing this, that, and the other, just listen and
Yeah.
validate her feelings and acknowledge the fact, like, hey, I know you're having a full blown meltdown right now, but I also really see that you're trying to get yourself under control. And I really appreciate that. But I'm also the entire time trying not to freak out because I'm trying to regulate my emotions. And my son, he's in the Sour Patch stage. He's the sweetest kid that you could ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
But man, he loves to push that boundary,
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like you said, with our clients, it's the same as being a parent. And sometimes you have to
Mm-hmm.
parent your clients, which is the weirdest thing to do, but they might have stuff going on that has put them in a bad mood. And unfortunately, you just happen to be the one that's on the receiving end of it. And if you
Yeah.
take everything personally, then you're going to become argumentative and you're not going to get anywhere. And, you get into a disagreement with somebody. And a lot of times, if you kind of just see red. Everything becomes a blur. You're not paying attention to what you're saying, and you can't do that. It's really not that serious. Like if someone is stealing money or hurting you or something like that, like yeah, absolutely. Like you have every right to want to engage.
Mm-hmm.
But running a business, it's not about engaging and being right, like you said, but at the same time, we appreciate when our clients understand that time old saying of the customer is always right. It's not always the case, but that's been pushed to everybody that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really about compromise, whether it's with your wife, with your husband, with your kids, with
Mm-hmm.
just running the business. Like you have to be able to balance it because nobody is going to be there to save you at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah, it's very true. Yeah, I think that's a good note to end on. So, man, John, I really appreciate you. I appreciate the value that you bring to my audience and the value that you bring to our community with your business. And I just want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. As somebody who is on the outside, looking in and sees what you do every day, man, I can tell you that you're doing well. And I know that doesn't mean that there's not challenges or hard times, but I know that if you just keep going and keep doing what you're doing and, running your business with the character that you have, you'll continue to do well. And again, that doesn't mean there's not going to be challenges. There's many more ahead, right? I was talking
Yep.
to my CPA and they've been in business, or she's been a business owner for like over 20 years or something, and she asked a question recently of like, hey, I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was like, what did you think you wouldn't be dealing with now that you still are, or something like that. And I think I said something like, does it ever get easy? It's like, I'm about to be 10 years in. I'm like, when do the challenges stop? And then it's just easy, like being a business owner. And she's like, it's an illusion. She's like, it never gets easy. The challenges just change. Like you win in certain areas and you overcome certain challenges, and then there's a new challenge ahead. And it's like it doesn't end, it just changes, right? So the thing that you were worried about 5 years ago isn't going to be the same thing that you're worried about, 5 years from now. So hope that's encouraging to you. But
I had a buddy the other day tell me, I'll say this and then, I got to
yeah,
start
go
my
ahead.
day. But, I had a buddy of mine say the other day, he actually made a TikTok and he goes, people always tell me, they're like, man, it's so nice to see that you run a successful business. And, he goes, no, I appreciate that. He's like, but I'm not a successful business. I'm self-employed. He goes, if I was a successful business owner, I wouldn't be picking up a dumpster at 10 o'clock at night, And it kind of just got me thinking that, like, wow, yes, we portray ourselves as successful business owners, but, the whole thing with you running off the ladder is, you know, when you're still on the truck, like, yeah, even when you're off the truck, it doesn't stop. The stress doesn't stop. Like,
Right.
it's great to be successful and feel successful and everything like that. But at the end of the day, we're self-employed. Like,
Yeah.
we have to make it happen one way or the other, whether I'm starting my day at 4:30 in the morning to cram as much in one day and still get home by 7:30 at night. You got to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Well, here's a quote I'll end with. You sent this to me the other day, and I think you were going to bring it up earlier, but you didn't. You sent me this. It says, "A river cuts through rock, not because of its power, but because of its persistence." So I think that's a good way to end this episode. Stay persistent, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope you found it helpful. Hopefully, you got some takeaways that are going to help you with your business and help you to continue moving forward and thriving. If you did find it helpful, share it with somebody. And if you listen to it regularly, please rate and review the show on any major podcast platform. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, please like this video, share it, comment, give some feedback. If you need resources for your business, like the ones that John and I talked about today, I have some resources in the show notes. I have affiliate links. Obviously, if you use those, I do get credit, which helps to support me, support this podcast and what I do here. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode of the Off the Ladder podcast, and I'll see you next time.